Hey guys,
We're back.
Yeah, we are so blessed because we have a backup computer, which I don't know. I'm looking at this and the visual quality, and the audio quality are going to be a lot better. Mm-hmm. So I think we might be wanting to record on this going forward.
Yeah. Totally agree.
So right before my computer crashed, we were talking about, what were we talking about? We were talking about how Simone de Beauvoir is going to say that if we don't stare down the ambiguous condition, right, ethical performance is not going to matter at all, right? So someone would say, what is the point? What is the usefulness of being an ethical person if there is no immortality and it's not really serving our sort of hedonistic ends?
Right, and there's no what's the carrot? Exactly.
And so what does she say about all this sort of talk of usefulness and uselessness?
Oh boy.
You remember what she says?
I gotta refer to my notes.
Well,
sorry,
she says that talk is not warranted. That talk is not warranted. That is the talk of people that have falsely ascribed to cultural objective values. Like something is useful or useless in regards to how society defines it, right? And so what society defines is totally arbitrary. Like before society existed, Simone de Beauvoir is going to say there was nothing that was useful or useless. Like, for instance...
Right, it's like totally neutral. Like there's nothing that is useful or useless. It's what you make of it.
Right. So what do people say about philosophy a lot of times?
Oh, you study philosophy? What are you going to do with that degree?
Right. So the implication is like that the study of philosophy and what we're doing is what? Is utterly useless, right? Mm-hmm. And why is it utterly useless? Because it doesn't have an obvious financial payoff in the world of capitalist sort of society, right?
It doesn't have an impressive cultural currency.
Right. At least people don't think it's not obvious to people that it does. Though I will know that there is this like urban myth that goes around that people who study philosophy end up making a ton of money. They just shouldn't go to grad school for it. Like people like Carly Fiorina or whatever. She got a. So they say that philosophy is a great preparatory discipline, like that it prepares you for law school or your MBA.
Don't go to grad school.
But if you do get a PhD in it, well, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that another day. But supposedly it makes you better at everything else, so you will thrive and succeed in your career. So if you're looking for a pragmatic justification for why you ought to download and donate to our app or listen to the podcast or anything like that,
check us out.
Is that we're going to make you smarter and better at your job, and then you make more money.
Exactly.
Supposedly. But the idea Simone de Beauvoir is going to say is that that the whole notion of usefulness and uselessness is totally absurd because it implies that there's an objective point of view outside of the self.
Right, there's something determining what's like right or wrong or useful or useless.
And what's Simone doing? She's absolutely leveling all these objective sources.
Doesn't she pretty much say that it's that we put meaning into everything?
Right. So that's going to be the question is why would we be ethical then, right? Mm-hmm. Go elaborate on this meaning thing that you're talking about.
I mean, I interpret it as sort of like a meaning as in like the value of your own existence. But maybe I'm taking it too far.
Well, no, you're taking it to precisely the right spot. It's a little vague, and it's not your fault because we're very early.
But it's ambiguity.
Right. Well, she's going to give us more specifics, and we can adjudicate at the end whether or not she ever overcomes the vagueness. But the idea, we're just getting started here. But so this is the first we heard of it, is that the ethically existing life is not going to be justified by things outside of the self because there is nothing outside of the self. There's no God. There's no fixed society. There are no fixed values. So in order for ethical existence to justify itself, there have to be internally justifying reasons, right?
So there has to be like an internal sort of like moderator, right? If you think about it, if you remove God from the equation, okay, so there's like no divine authority, okay, like scratch that. And then if the opinions of other people don't matter, then like temporal law, like that's gone. Then isn't it kind of like process of elimination? Then you're kind of just, well, it's just me.
Yeah, and I mean she's gonna say that it is this being wholly focused on the intentionality of the person that is actually going to preserve our feelings of superiority over the dumb animals, right? So like if we give ourselves over to technology, we're reduced to gnats. Yeah. If we give ourselves over to religion, our lives don't matter. Again, we're reduced to gnats. If we give ourselves over to Marxist ideology, we're reduced to gnats. Everything reduces us to gnats. But if we maintain the focus on the internal loci of moral volition, then we can rip ourselves out of animality and be these ethically constituted beings that have superiority preserved over the temporal order.
So it's like rooting ourselves in our own will.
Yeah,
like entrenching ourselves.
Yeah, that's how we get freedom. That's how we get autonomy and whatnot. But then the question becomes, is this just another lie that we tell ourselves? And then, because she's saying that, that world historical movements and history and culture and religion and all these other things are lies. Like these are fictions. Well, I don't think we can answer this right now, but we'll have to be like, is Simone just giving us another false narrative? And why is this false narrative better than other false narratives?
Right, like why would we want to buy into this one other than the ones that we have nicely set up for us?
Yeah.
Come along. Yeah.
Well, presumably she's going to be offering us something that the other worldviews don't offer. And presumably what the other worldviews offer is meaninglessness. And like I said, like there's going to be something about meaning and what that means and how that's, and we'll have to ask ourselves if it's totally solipsistic, if it's just about the individual, and that's something that I'll get to here. But moving on a little bit here, the ethical point of view that she's going to be calling this, like when we do sort of comport ourselves against this ambiguous condition, she's going to call this existentialist conversion, just to get some terminology correct. And there's, like I said, there's no hope that sort of our mortality will be transcended. But at the same time, just because we know that we're going to die, this doesn't mean that we can't have passions and get involved in projects and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think, to me, my read on it was this embracing death wasn't to necessarily say to become like fixated with death, but it's really to learn how to actually free yourself.
Right. I think when we're freed, and what it means to be free is that we're only, like, what our ethical action is only matters in our eyes and not some God or something like that. But I think we've hinted at it in the last podcast, and I'll say here, I wonder if this is a fundamentally sort of, she claims it's fundamentally incompatible with the religious point of view, but I mean, I don't necessarily think of it as being incompatible on the face of it. I
think it's just because Agustin, to an extent, does reconcile the will and how your own actions can reconcile with God and act. I'm not going to say in God's interest, but can act in such a way it can bring you closer to God.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense? I don't know. But maybe Augustin's sort of is he an outlier in that regard?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there's a very strong tradition that Agustin is a part of, and I really don't think what Agustin was saying is really that far from what we really, really believe. I mean, so far as he gets at the truth, he's not an outlier, right? And so much as Simone gets at the truth, she's not an outlier. It's only,
they both approach it from different angles, but the crux of it is, you're kind of the master of your own fate.
Yeah.
And you determine your own path.
And so
you're ultimately responsible for it.
Yeah. So maybe we need to make it a little bit more obvious what it means to be the master of your own fate. So if we spelled out sufficiently what unconditional values are, right? There are sort of these static, handed down conditions of how we ought to live our life. But on existentialist conversion, how is that different? First of all,
yeah, you might have to rephrase that.
Well, first of all, it implies that life is worth living, so we have to choose the life, right?
Right.
But the values are going to be something that organically emerge, right? Whereas like
right.
biblical.
Oh, okay, yeah. So she basically says like the kind of two tenets of that are so whether or not life is actually worth living, and then like under what conditions do you want to live?
Right. So you are on the existentialist conversion. After existentialist conversion, mm-hmm. you are the one that decides what values you're going to posit. They are not going to be hand-me-down values.
Right. Like what system of beliefs you want to ascribe to.
Right. So what is the obvious first-year objection to such a program? Well, it's obvious to me because I have some distance from what it was like to be a first year now that I'm a old dude. Mm-hmm. But I think the first like major move that anyone makes in philosophy is like, well, how do like they make this sort of relativistic move, right? Like, and so the charge is like, if existential values are going to be things that we create and things that we fashion and aren't sort of calcified into the moral, ether. Things that don't calcify in ether, but it's not part of the frozen nature of morality.
You're getting a little bit like Aristotelian there with ether.
Yeah. But I guess what I'm trying to say is,
in plain English, what is it?
The charge is if we are each choosing our own values, how does this not lead to sort of a heinous relativism where other individuals would be able to subjugate other individuals?
Right, like bending. So like having your own will, but bending other people to your will? Yeah.
So how are we going to have a sustainable existentialist ethical program if everybody's values essentially have the same status, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
like the same importance?
Yeah, what's to stop the Ubermensch from saying no, power is the ultimate way that we ought to live rather than compassion.
And you have to make freedom the like absolute greatest and like most important thing, but yeah, that's it almost sorry.
Well, no, the thing that she doesn't, I don't think she adequately addresses this right now.
Yeah, and like that's the thing that's a little bit she doesn't really like describe that, but she just basically says that you have to like prioritize that. But I feel like what's the likelihood of everyone getting on board saying, you know what, my freedom and everyone else's freedom is the biggest priority in my life?
Well, I don't think we have enough right now to answer that question definitively. So let's bracket that because she is going to get to that because eventually she's going to try to get to the perspective that we can have valid democratic laws for everybody, even though everybody is fashioning their own values. There's a certain sort of framework that everybody has to operate in.
Consensus, right?
Yeah, and so as she develops this ethical program, she's going to have to develop what those parameters are. But we're just now first hearing about it, and we're only 18 pages into the book, so I don't want to crucify her for not having that yet. Although I did think it was kind of interesting when she does consider that she may be slipping into relativism. She doesn't address that issue head on right then and there. You know what she does? She goes, well, by the way, the fact that just because you believe in God and may have these ready-made values, that doesn't make your ethical performance any better, because she says that on the existentialist perspective, what we do matters more, right? And we've hinted at this maybe last podcast or earlier in this one, I forget since it's a two-parter. Mm-hmm. There is no, on the existentialist perspective, the secular existentialist perspective, there is no God that will make up for our moral deficiency. So when we go about performing ethical activity, we are forever marking our life on the earth.
It's like a permanent imprint that, like God's not going to clean up our messes.
Yeah, there's no rapture. Which is
super interesting because like once the damage is done, it's done.
It's forever, and so what does that mean? If the damage is done, it's like getting a tattoo, right? It's like, if you were going to go get a tattoo,
so that means all your attention is going to be fixed back on you. You're going to scrutinize every. I mean, I would probably scrutinize every single thing I did.
Yeah, think about it. So if you were to get a tattoo, because I think this is funny, and I want to use this analogy. If you could just erase the tattoo at any moment, like just wipe it off, right? You'd be like, oh, I'll get like the stereotypical a tribal armband, or maybe I'll get like a butterfly, something like that, because you can just wash it away, right? Mm-hmm. But if making yourself an ethical agent, you can only do it once, all right? Or you have the one body to tattoo. Right. What are you going to do with that tattoo? You're going to make that tattoo what?
Really, really awesome.
You're
gonna do research. Yeah,
you're gonna be very deliberate. It's gonna be very meaningful. Like, you're not gonna choose something that could be something that you could regret.
Right.
So think about, on the existentialist perspective, being a good person is like getting an awesome tattoo.
Yeah.
One that you will still like when you're like 75 years old. And that's essentially, I think, what she's kind of saying. I like this analogy. Mm-hmm. What do you think about this analogy?
I think it works.
I don't have any tattoos.
Me either.
I don't know.
My mom told me she'd kill me if I got one. So.
Never. Yeah, I've never had the courage to get a tattoo. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I don't know. She's going to eventually say, and I think I've said this already, that eventually the existentialist values that we choose are going to be able to be integrated into everybody else's. But we'll have to see how that happens. That's all I got for today. You have more notes than me, so maybe I'll just shut up and let you drive.
I mean, I think that's pretty much everything. Because I didn't really actually demarcate the page numbers, so I think I got kind of far ahead in the reading.
That's fine. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap it up? I mean, this is kind of a short one.
I think one thing that I'll close on was one thing that she pointed to when she said, right and duty are essentially the exact same thing as thinking and willing.
So why did you find that interesting?
I don't know. I just think that, the sort of cultural norms and values of like what's right and like what's duty is really just exercising your own judgment and then asserting your own will.
Yeah.
So anything with like Agustin, I kind of like get excited and pick up on.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. What about off camera? Like before we got going at all today, you mentioned there was a passage about nature and morality. Did today's podcast clear that up for you? And do you want to reiterate it, or are you straight on that now?
Yeah.
Maybe let people at home know what you were wrestling with, and how you made sense of it, maybe over the past hour.
Yeah, so I got really hung up on, and I think it's something that I still need to like think about and like mull over, is this idea of nature and morality, and how pretty much she says that moral consciousness will disappear if ethical law became natural law.
So after everything that we've discussed, I think earlier I was sort of giving my take on it, and now that we've had a whole conversation about what we prepped for today, how do you see that passage differently? And what was troubling you about it earlier, and why it may or may not be troubling you less?
Well, I mean, I think that this idea, like the natural law, now that we've kind of, which is funny considering how much Agustin and how much, Aristotle and stuff that we talk about, but this idea that the natural laws are more like animalistic side.
Yeah, I think natural law, it's more driven by instincts.
Right.
And those instincts can take on a social dimension, right? So even if it's not just like scavenging for food or something like that, it may be scavenging for attention on Instagram or something like that. So there can be a sort of a higher manifestation of the appetites that we have and the immediacy that we have. Mm-hmm. But on the moral perspective is on the existentialist perspective, it is to liberate us from those things that are externally determine us. Our appetites not only externally determine us by the hedonist perspective, but gods and culture and morals and mores, those externally determine us as well. Right. So she has I think she would have a very broad understanding of what nature means, because it almost becomes that morality becomes this like Philistine mechanism that we just passively embrace.
So we need that like morality and like ethics to help us pull away from like our nature.
The more that...
So that's what this podcast is like clarified for me.
Right. The more that...
Because I was like, but like, what's the difference? And then if they're the same, then does it really matter? And So in this framework, you can't really have the two like meld connected together?
Yeah, it's an interesting question about when does, like, because I think we'll want to talk about that as we go on, is like, when do our conditional values on the existentialist perspective, can those become frozen and become unconditional, right? So when do we know if we're too beholden to, if we develop new moral instincts on the existential perspective, if those in time will become just like the hand-me-down morality as well? And so how do we keep
if we can like outgrow values,
right? How do we keep our morality vigorous and vital? And how do we know what's the internal test for that? How do we know?
That's a really good question.
Did Simone ever fall back into sort of moral laxity? I mean, does she ever upbraid herself for that? Like, can we get to what are the safeguards against becoming ethically lazy on the existential perspective?
Yeah, and like, is there sort of like a metric, to like test that?
Yeah, because if it becomes second nature, are we moral at all? Are we just predetermined by other values?
Yeah, or is it something that just becomes a mindless activity?
Yeah, and that's gonna be problematic, right? But what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to enter into some complex moral algorithm every time we make a moral decision, and then the question is, what constitutes a moral decision? What's the magnitude of the ethical moment?
Right.
Like, what does it have to? Does it have to ascend to the moment like where you're like Bonhoeffer, like blessing assassins for Hitler, or is it like choosing what we ate today?
Right, and especially since we're bombarded by decisions every single day.
Yeah, I mean, people say that every moment is an ethical performance. Are we doing something ethical right now?
I hope so.
I think we might be.
I'd like to tell myself that, but then maybe that's bad faith. Maybe I'm just creating.
You're a good person.
Yeah.
That's my use here.
Yeah, I'm going to buy into your story that you're creating. I'm going to buy into that narrative.
Yeah, I mean, the loop culture over here.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I got. Did you want to elaborate anymore?
I think that's it for now.
All right. Let's see. Let's upload this and get on with our lives.
Okay. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.